This is a short story I wrote to dedicate to Frank. The story of a man pissing on a plastic bottle. There was only a dream there. A 7-colored check skirt that floats in the air. A limestone cave behind foie gras panties. His teeth are yellowed with cigarettes. The enamel is completely destroyed. Sticky notes are full of red letters. The heroine of his sex drama is Android. Android for farm maids is blonde. She looks like a teen. She looks like Milky Milf. In any case, depending on his mood, take a walk with Android. Neighbor's dog has also been cyborged and prolonged his life. He thinks, oh, my pretty girl is still cool. During the walk, he meets an earthworm in the grass. The earthworm wiggles and asks him, "Hey, is niacin and riboflavin all of you?" He bows to a kind earthworm and replies, "Thank you. If you dried up, let's make it a decoration for my blondie." There is nothing such an honor for the hated earthworm. Under the sun, the tongue of the android shone lustrously. In Japan, there's a myth that dick will swell when pissing an earthworm. Then, the blessing of human body fluids is it cannot be given to earthworms. But what's the problem with android water? He commands her blonde. She crouches and makes a puddle around the earthworm. Earthworms gladly jump in there. The power of heavenly magic transformed an earthworm into a human. The figure was more handsome than him. Blondie sadly said to him, "Daddy, I want to go to my bride." An earthworm left with her. He regretted being kind to earthworms. His charm was no more than earthworms. He thought of under hot weather. "I don't have enough B vitamins." And when he came home, he cried and took out dick. He thought of her and urinated a plastic bottle. But his swollen mammoth, thinking too much about her, was stuck in a plastic bottle. Damn it. There was no worse ejaculation than hanging on Monday. Falling like an avalanche is the soul of an angel. His shadow play didn't even have a shadow. A faint murderous light illuminates the melancholy of the forbidden mannequin. Love comes to kill me. Well-developed disappointment turns youth into gray hair. Electronic conversion is natural return. The electromagnetic transition brought spring to posterity. However, Ian's body remains exposed to the winter. Love has no meaning there, only ruthless kisses. The media clung to his spare ribs. Only a lonely gaze continues to dwell on Hammerbeat, the dark graphic that ran ahead. An indifferent thundercloud comes from somewhere, a bookmark for a library that divides cells. From some point of time, my love is only my appearance. Her sheer white skin resembles a white bone. The dance of death integrates with the purity of first love. The secretion of endorphins is the writer's soul. A roaring roar is a weak howl. Violence, the mischief of a cat, doesn't eat dogs either. The marginalization of serotonin is a freak of pharmaceutical companies. Shiori's library is cell division. Some indifference comes from thunderclouds. The darkness of dot graphics is ahead. Actually, there is no love in the face. The air conditioning floating of first love was cult-friendly. Her white bones shattered due to unknown pleasure. A prayer of sorrow for the convicted monks. A crazy electronic sound smashed the sea. Skull jelly has no grip. The saints' lust for animals is truly miserable. But if today starts, I'll be an oil cicada and fly in the sky. Hieroglyphs are drawn on the bald head of politicians. The unique interpretation spits on the ugliness of all denialists. I don't want to interpret the ugly all denialists spit on my own. Bald politicians can only draw hieroglyphs. Oil cicada flying in the sky. Is that Ian? But if the beginning is today's banana, the tragic fact is the saint of beast. Jelly-shaped skull with no grip, an electronic sound that cracks the sea brings the dance of epilepsy. A prayer of heartbreak engulfed the monks. From the belly of a ruptured pig, rose was overflowing endlessly. A dumb snoring is an unimaginative imagination. Like mobs at death, we cramp. Sweet romance is just in a rose. The dragon's cyberspace chases followers one after another. Solitude is formed by social responsibility. Bitch's philosophy is engraved in the expense. Bitch's philosophy is ignored by ridicule. From the rupture of roses, pigs were overflowing endlessly. Yawning stupidity unrelated to imagination. The cramping moth is near our death. Mere neurose is a sweet romance. The follower's cyberspace chases dragons one after another. Forming social responsibility is just loneliness. Bitch's philosophy is engraved on the ornaments. Bitch's philosophy turned into the first pig, and this poem was repeated. My Sonic Youth Diary, Part 1. Around 2004, when I was listening to Sonic Nurse, I was a classical music college student. I was tired of the bitter world of classical music. So one day I explained to the composer's professor, I can't take your lecture. One day, during the lecture of professor, I blasted Kill Your Idols with a huge speaker in the hall. I got out of college giving a fuck sign to my professor. Even now, I work as a classical composer and punk rocker. I'm usually quiet, but you can't touch it if I'm sharp. My Sonic Youth Diary, Part 2, Tilde, a poem dedicated to size dirty boots. Tilde, I just smell fetish. When I was a student, I often smelled the boots of girls I like. The sniff made me trip more than any drug. At one point I tripped to Northern Europe. It seems to be going to see The Residents live. I picked up many Scandinavian beautiful girls there. I played with 10 girlfriends as a special play partner. I dried up, but I came back to Japan soon, because it's just a hallucination with the smell of boots. I immediately went home and saw the Dragon Ball from 7 p.m. Android 18 was similar to one of his girlfriends in Northern Europe. She became the wife of Krillin, is it meaning Krillin? But it was I who took her virginity. But her door number 2 belongs to Krillin, I thought, but in reality, I was an elementary school student. The instrumental laziness of the end of this song, exactly the strange scent of my favorite girl's dirty boots. My Sonic Youth Diary, Part 3, Experimental Jet Set Trash and No Star is the first Psy album I heard in high school. I bought it because I was so impressed by the beauty of Kim's jacket. But I thought about listening to all the songs. What on earth does this band want to make our listeners feel? Lol. Anyway, the sound of this last song, which was repeatedly heard after being silent, mixed with various noises, was apparently Japanese, which made me feel strange. This is obviously the gas station navigation voice. She says, welcome. Is it full? The pronunciation is like this. Arasyimace. Manton Desuka. My Sonic Youth Diary, Part 4. I love this SYR series. I heard some of them when I was in high school. I was impressed by the greatness of Psy, who continued to play major music but also continued to experiment with music for the future. This SY1 has human warmth and the experimental spirit, looks like a chaotic art, and is really easy to listen to. Ellipsis. If Kurt Cobain wasn't killed by the press, he might have been on the same track. How wonderful could Kurt's songwriting talent go to experimental music? We have no choice but to imagine. My Sonic Youth Diary, Part 5. It's a day late in Japan, but a heartfelt blessing for Steve Shelley's birthday. Ellipsis. Considering now, Steve may be my favorite of the Psy members. He looks quiet and unobtrusive, but he is a clear, cool, and intelligent man. I think it's Steve's Sonic Youth. Ellipsis. As with any band, unless the drummer has a personality, it won't succeed. It's not a commercial achievement, but a success in the sense of establishing individuality as an artist. I think he's the best gift heaven gave to Sai. At the end of the PV of Dirty Boots, his figure of throwing while sticking is very cute. My Sonic Youth Diary, part a heartfelt blessing to Thurston Moore's birthday. I aim to be something like Sonic Youth. Without them, I wouldn't be there now. It is rare to find a band like Psy that can suddenly mute the power chord to create a dramatic development. I think the punk that comes from Thurston's delicate picking sets it apart from other punk rock. Thurston also likes fantasy novels, games, and B-grade sci-fi movies. So there may already be some story in their jam. Mysterious anomalous tuning is really effective at highlighting their occasional naive and nostalgic sound. I and they never give up on any experimental performance. I don't even have to bother anyone. Needless to say, who knows what Sonic Youth is, their noise isn't the only other weapon. No matter what kind of moderate sound they make, there is certainly Psy's personality, and I am aiming for such a unique existence. Thurston's solo career has tended to make him rather more like acoustic music. His radical inner punk rocker no longer needs to rely solely on sound, right? Psy also has meditative poetry, and that aspect may have become important within Thurston. The newcomer, who became a listener from Goo and Dirty, may be confused by Thurston's attitude. I started listening to Psy when I was in high school around the year 2000 when I listened to NYC Ghosts and Flowers in real time. The title song sung by Lee is great, but my favorite track on this album is Small Flowers Crack Concrete. And Thurston's recitations, like the fascinating rock and roll accompaniment, seem to come to my mind. I think many foreigners misunderstand the true meaning of hentai. As a Japanese, I will teach you that I know the etymology of hentai. Cute girls all over the world are now playing role-playing ahagaya while cosplaying. The tendency to bring the world of erotic to reality is good or bad. What about that phenomenon? The masturbation is called sensory in old Japanese slang. Isn't the guy who likes sensory satisfied with pornography, hentai images and videos on the internet? Since I was born in 1983, I naturally came into contact with Japanese tokusatsu heroes, anime, games and manga. I saw Sailor Moon in real time when I was 9 years old. Naturally, I'm a child, so I've been exposed to these works regardless of the hentai idea. I just enjoyed anime and manga because they were so interesting. Isn't it normal for one kid? In other words, my interest in Japanese anime, manga, and games, and my sexual interests were almost irrelevant to me. Of course, I wasn't completely sexually uninterested in them. When I was in elementary school, I often played sensory while watching manga and movie bed scenes. But I rarely had a sexual interest in a beautiful, real-life movie actress. But I still love Sharon Stone's Basic Instinct bed scene. I still like cowgirl position because she has no sin, but that scene of Sharon. Oh, I derailed a little. Nijigen's love for the heroine was for me, the head of real girls. But I was a child, so I had no knowledge. I misunderstood that anime, manga, and games like those created in Japan have similar works in the world. Until the Internet Society, I never knew that the history of Japanese subculture was a rare event in the world. For a period of time, Japanese media treated otaku as an abnormal person. Sadly, my parents also thought that otaku like me was an abnormal guy like the media. I started writing novels when I was 7, and started drawing manga when I was 8. And from the age of 10, I started composing and lost my interest in real girls. There were about 30 real girls I had a faint love with, but like many boys, nothing developed with them. Okay, finally, about the etymology of hentai. I don't know too old Japanese history. But at least until about 100 years ago, hentai in the sense of metamorphosis, or transformation, has nothing to do with sexuality. There's a wonderful work called Mizuno Hentai by Japanese composer Michio Miyagi, which means transformation of water. I don't know why, but maybe after World War II, hentai became a Japanese slang meaning pervert. When we hear hentai, we Japanese still think that it means pervert. But for some reason overseas, the word hentai has become a more distorted meaning to the Japanese. In the first place, there are many Japanese who do not know that hentai is now an international language, or that hentai is becoming an international language. By the way, a similar slang has eki, because hentai's acronym H can only be pronounced eki by the Japanese. Yet, Japanese people really can't speak English. There is also the aspect that a unique culture was born because of that. People in other Asian countries often speak English. Now, financially, Japan is losing to other Asian countries, and culturally. The anime director, Mamoru Oshii, who I admired for Ghost in the Shell and Pat Labor, said in an interview, Japanese animation is no longer able to create a worldview, there are only characters and stories. And he also said, the ages of the leading animators in Japan are over 40. And now there are really few young Japanese people who want to become animators. Animators can only make money with their own skills. And no animators work until retirement. In inverse proportion to this, the number of young Japanese people who want to become voice actors is increasing. Of course, the chances that they will succeed as voice actors will be lower. The current Japanese subculture is gradually becoming unbalanced. The gradual decline of the Japanese animation industry is obvious. There are a growing number of talented young people abroad seeking to adopt anime and game formats, including Japanese hentai. If they create an anime or game that incorporates their unique ethnic colors and elements of Japanese subculture by combining their budget and technology, Japanese animation and games will no longer win. If that doesn't happen, Japanese subculture creators have no choice but to collaborate with overseas creators. However, as I said, Japanese animators and game creators can hardly speak English. This is a big obstacle. In this way, I professed that I wasn't interested in real girls. But even those guys may fall in love with real girls. A few years ago, I made an almost give-up confession to a real girl, but of course the worst result. I think it's better for a guy like me not to love real girls, because I became yandere for the girl. I thought of creating a track that explained the situation of Japanese pop music. However, if you think carefully, I was listening to only overseas rocks. I realized that I wasn't very familiar with the circumstances of Japanese pop music. But there are some things I can say to everyone in other countries. 90% of Japanese are listening to J-pop. Only 10% of people like me are listening to foreign pop music. This is a rare event in the world, but Japanese people can't really speak English, and they can't even listen to English at all. The Japanese have provided most of their culture with their own culture, except for Hollywood movies. A typical example is enga, which works well with old people. But Japanese pops have too many deliberately naive expressions with the correct pitch. The Japanese pitch myth is fanatical, and I'm terrified. The popularity of Vocaloids in Japan has become less obtrusive, but the accuracy of the pitch and the naiveness of the poem remain the same now and in the past. The Japanese insert a sentimental and impressive melody with the correct pitch even in the rap chorus. I think it's not a rap in a global sense, not limited to pop music. The Japanese tried to imitate foreign culture. In Japan, there were movements called group sounds around the 1970s, and they were said to be poor imitations of overseas rock. Group sounds has a lot of terrible music, but the song composed by Koichi Sugiyama, who is famous for the game Dragon Quest series, is wonderful. At the same time, Folk music also became popular in Japan, which was a common sense of poetry that satisfied the details of life. To the best of my knowledge, there is only Shigeru Izumi, a folk singer, who touched upon the fundamental issue of humanity. He also played rock and roll. But Izumi said in an interview, "For me, neither folk music nor rock and roll fits anywhere." He also said that rock and roll electrical stimulation does not save melancholic Japanese. After that, I don't know if it's a no-wave effect or accidental, a very niche Japanese noise music was born. In the world of contemporary classical music in Japan, concrete music was popular even before that. However, as usual, Japan was following the trends of foreign countries. Even so, the Japanese idol movement has developed uniquely in Japan, but I am not familiar with Japanese idols. I would like to talk a little about only one, Johnny Kitagawa, who died during this time. Johnny Kitagawa, a wealthy and gay man, gathered a number of beautiful boys and formed many idol groups. That is what is called Johnny and Associates. They got huge popularity from Japanese women, but they were more idols than artists. Moreover, there are too many things Japanese fans want from Japanese idols. They had to do autograph sessions, handshake events, stage plays, TV drama actors, and even comedians and stuntmen. Isn't the stuntman overkill? The disbanded SMAP is a typical example. Johnny Kitagawa had a thorough control over the idols in their office, but now that he's gone, I think Johnny and Associates is on the verge of collapse. Now, let's get back to the music I'm more interested in. Yesterday I listened to Death Grips' No Love Deep Web through the album. I thought it was a really cool album. However, safe J-pop fans cannot accept such sounds. They hate dark, heavy sounds. Once upon a time, even in Japan, hard rock heavy sounds were liked. However, the representative Japanese bands, Sekima 2 and X Japan, have a feeling that their looks were worshipped rather than their musicality. After all, in the world of J-pop, light musicality and some abstract and frivolous poetry are preferred. I've almost ignored J-pop, but these days I'm starting to rebel against them. Therefore, I decided to experimentally create and record gangsta rap in Japanese later. I want to criticize Japanese politics and social issues in Japanese. And while you may be surprised overseas, Japan also has a problem of racism. The Japanese are enduring, saying, "I just have to put up with myself," but I think that attitude is outdated. Edo era people who specialized in executions called Ada Hinin in the major cities of Kansai and Kanto. They were despised as being less than livestock, and their descendants seemed to be unhumanized. When I went to Kyoto, I came across the street protest for Ada Hinin. That was a shocking incident for me. The population of such oppressed people is very small in Japan. Even if I did visit Kyoto at that time, I wouldn't know that Japan had a problem of racism. It may be a small event that is incomparable to the racial discrimination issue overseas. Other than that, the Japanese almost destroyed the Ainu people of Hokkaido. The Japanese almost destroyed the Okinawan Ryukyu people, and Okinawa still has problems with U.S. military bases. In Japan, there is also a mafia-like organization called Yakuza. After the war, they even belonged to criminal boys to teach them courtesy. The world of Yakuza, which has a certain level of discipline, could even make bad boys, so they could get along with Japanese police to some extent. Of course, they are still violent groups who earn money through prostitution and gambling. If you are interested in Yakuza, you can take a look at the work of the now famous Japanese film director, Takeshi Kitano, though he is more famous as a comedian in Japan. In this way, there are few people in the world who get angry in Japan on a daily basis. However, in the invisible part, there are certainly many phenomena that should be expressed as gangsta rap. In Japan, individualism or national solidarity is very difficult to create. Even if the Japanese become adults, they just crouch like Akari Shinji-kun in Evangelion. Crazy and aggressive guys like me will have to change the Japanese while communicating internationally. Apart from that, and it's not my duty, otherwise I feel like I can't survive as a Japanese. This time it's about my love of hentai since middle school. Since I was 13, I was crazy about playing Togameki Memorial, Ren'ai simulation game, released by Konami. From here on, I'll call this game the nickname Toki Mema. In this game, you will be in love with various fictional girls. It's not a harem game made for men. In fact, I think this game is still more severe and cruel than it really is. First of all, Toki Memo has a really troublesome system to increase parameters. The protagonist is a normal boy high school student who has just entered Hiroyuki High School and initially has low parameters like many games. Parameters such as national language, mathematics, sports, trivia, appearance, arts are complicatedly divided. At the opening of this game, Hiroyuki High School legend is inserted. It is a story that, under the legendary tree in the schoolyard of this high school, the boy who was confessed to love by a girl at the graduation ceremony can both be a happy couple forever. In other words, the ultimate purpose of this game is that the target heroine makes a confession of love on the day of graduation, so the player himself cannot make a confession of love. The heroines naturally have their own favorite boy type, but the player has to train himself to be the man who matches his target girl. Each time you make a point of attracting yourself, the player gets attention from another heroine, and you have to make a good date with those girls. And the favorability system makes this game really thrilling. A girl who hasn't dated for 3 months hates the player and makes her rumors bad. If that happens, the players will be less likable to all of the heroines. I fell in love with Nijino Saki-san, the most popular heroine of this game, and cleared her only. Nijino-san belongs to a baseball club or a soccer club and always supports me. Yes, she is still my wife, by the way. Nijino Saki means over the rainbow in English, and Sachiko Sugawara, the voice actor who plays her role, released an album with the same name as the singer. Also, Niji means Nijipin in Japanese, that is the heroine of fiction, and she was a symbolic presence for me. And in the unforgettable summer of 1997, Konami released the first PlayStation game, Tokimeki Memorial Drama Series Volume 1 Nijiro no Saishin, with her as the main heroine. This is a hero who aims for a regular belonging to the soccer club. It is a sub-story game where you spend several weeks while being supported by Nijino-san. This game has a simple system, but the production and the scenario are wonderful, as I learned later. This game was supervised by Hideo Kojima, who is famous for the Metal Gear series. I used to play Tokimemo in front of my classmate's cousin girl who looked at me with envy. She asked me, "Why do you just aim at Nijino-san?" I answered, "I like her." Then she said to me, "I don't have to say that clearly." Since then, she and I have been estranged. By the way, I have never used the word hentai in this story. Sure, Tokimemo is a consumer game and there is no sex element, although there are a few service scenes. However, hentai also had a meaning like a guy who is lazy in fiction at the time, so it can be said that all of this story belongs to hentai. Of course, when I was in junior high school, I was watching a lot of ero manga and ero anime. This is the first time I saw ero anime. I can't forget the impact of people at Nanamura Hospital. From that time, the existence of Arrowgate was well known in Windows 98 and Sega Saturn, but they were too expensive for most junior high school students at that time. Elf and Alice Soft, that still exists, were making a lot of money with their expensive Arrowgate. Now, let's talk a little seriously. However, I don't know much about transgender or asexuality, so I put off that phenomenon. Even now and in the past, the average age of Japanese first sex experiences is around high school students. However, in the current internet society, the situation is quite different. Boys and girls are divided into those who like sex and those who like masturbation. Boys and girls who like sex can quickly find the other person by chatting, etc. And contraceptives are now easily available. They often have their first sex experience at a very young age. These kids' sex friends are quite problematic in Japan today. Japanese TV is now all about health maintenance and supplement advertising programs for the elderly. Sex friends between kids are unlikely to be a problem on Japanese conservative TV news. So when it comes to TV, I only watch world news. Contrary to that, boys and girls who like masturbation with images and videos including hentai. As I said before, The old Japanese slang term for masturbation is called sensory. The image for masturbation is sensory no tamino neta. In Japanese it is abbreviated as zuraneta. Japanese kids, including current girls, make hentai zuraneta, or they're happy with having zuraneta, where they show masturbation to each other in chat. Today's Japanese kids are roughly divided into the two types I introduced. Certainly, even my generation experienced sex with kids, and I have petted a few girls. Even for me, hentai was better, because real girls don't get what they want. In this way, the younger generation of Japanese people are divided into two types: those who experience sex with kids and those who are always virgin. In other words, the fact that there are many boys and girls who experience sex in high school is only the statistics of Japan, and it is actually decreasing. The problem was probably invisible and must have been exacerbated for a long time. Even I like hentai. When I was in high school, I really wanted to have sex with a classmate. But another problem hampered it. Among the female high school students when I was in school, there was a movement called Kogyaru in Japan at that time. Most high school girls wore fancy makeup, loose socks, and super mini skirts enough to see panties, and they carried luxury brand shoes, bags, and accessories to show off. There were more girls in my high school, 70% of girls, 30% of boys. I witnessed the Kogyaru panties 20 times a day. Do you feel envious of that? Rather, I overlooked their panties, so I was almost never sexually excited. And Japan has the problem of enko, which has continued since then. This is, so to speak, a sexual intercourse with an elderly man who is likely to have a lot of money, at the will of the girls. Prostitution by the girl's own will, of course. I know that there were very few such girls. But in my high school, where 70% of girls are, such bitches were too conspicuous. As a healthy male high school student, I never fell in love with bitch. The Kogyaru girls at the time said to us boys of the same age, "You guys, if you have the money, I'll fuck you." Will such a bitch have a romance? Today's Japanese high school students have another problem. Even if they don't like hentai, they tend to have communication disorder because they are used to VR too much, or because they have been familiar with SNS etc. since they were kids. Even if they are not obstacles, they are simulating reality somewhere too much, and they have very few options. When they talk to someone face to face, they'll be incomprehensible and confused if they're out of a certain format. If that happens, it's still difficult for them to communicate even if they're not of the opposite sex. Even modern Japanese girls tend to have communication problems. Or, girls tend to be disappointed with boys of the same age who have communication problems and tend to be enthusiastic about hentai and VR, and some girls lose interest in real love. The famous Japanese anime director Yoshiyuki Tomino for Gundam has been afraid of this all the time. However, he is a radical man, and he says, "I will kill such a young man," or the Japanese female device slang, amenko, in an interview. Therefore, Tomino has never appeared in Japanese media either now or in the past. We boys don't understand, but there are girls who are crazy about gay hentai between handsome guys, such as boys love yaoi, which has almost the same meaning. Yaoi is a slang that takes the initials of Yamanashi, Ochinashi, Aminashi in Japanese. When translated into English, no climax, no point, no meaning in Japan, shoujo manga, which has such a tendency, has been popular among girls since the 1970s. What I said right now is sometimes drawn in the manga Watanabe. That manga seems to be popular overseas. Actually, I think that Japanese students today are at that level, but I think that the main character is still better at paying attention to people and wanting to interact with them. There are an enormous number of students in Japan today who do not want anyone to pay attention and do not want to associate with anyone. In other words, reality may be worse than Watanabe. Whatever. Today I just make hentai, zuraneta, and sensory. Bye.